Hey, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this masterclass. Really joined by, I would say, the best in the business. This event is titled Pre-Sales Mastery 101 with Carrie Sokolski and Paul Vidal. Carrie, I won't steal your thunder. Why don't you take a quick second and introduce yourself?
Appreciate that. Thanks, George. And hey, Paul. Carrie Sokolski, I'm the president and founder of Pre-Sales Mastery. I've been in pre-sales for 20 plus years. And after being both an individual contributor and then leading global pre-sales teams and sales enablement teams, started Pre-Sales Mastery a couple of years ago to fill the gap in the marketplace around SE enablement in terms of really working one-on-one with individuals. There's some really great pre-sales trainers out there that do group workshops and sort of rise the tide for all boats, but every individual is unique. They've got unique skill gaps and experience gaps. And so I coach individuals one-on-one, primarily on demo delivery through recorded demos that they've delivered to actual prospects. And they see fantastic returns in terms of just overall delivery, expertise, and results. So I'm excited to
Awesome.
be with you today.
Thank you so much, Paul, my friend, colleague. You're an old school Reprisian now. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, I can't believe this. This is I'm aging myself. A year at Reprise is 25. Though I don't have 25 years of pre-sales, I probably have like 15 or something. So I've been in the industry for a while. I lead the DSC team here at Reprise. Super excited to be speaking with you, Carrie, and thanks, George, for doing the introduction. I'm super passionate about SEs. This is, I don't know, I kind of stumbled upon this profession. I was like, this is awesome. So I am really excited, always happy to talk about it. And yeah, it should be a fun conversation.
And I gotta just give you and your team a shout out. Like you're crushing it, right? Like, we have our Slack notifications of every engagement you work on. It's just absolutely incredible, very inspiring. Carrie, let's talk a little bit about how pre-sales has changed or evolved in the last 48 months, because it seems like it's just really changed in a good way.
Yeah, I'd say there's probably, probably three big changes that I've seen, and Paul, I'm curious to get your take, given that you're actually in this space leading a team today. But I think the first and the most obvious is there's been a sea change in terms of community for pre-sales between SE Nation, Pre-Sales Collective, North American Association of Sales Engineers. There is just an actual pre-sales community that exists today that didn't 2 years ago. And there's been fantastic traction across all of those particular ones that I mentioned. But what I think they're doing really well is they're doing a lot of things. They're really shining a light on exposing what the role is and advocating for the role in general. I think pre-sales has generally been sort of second-class citizens in the sales organization in a lot of cases. I was lucky enough to grow up in the exception to that rule. And so I had a preconceived notion that everybody in pre-sales had this fantastic, recognition that we were the secret sauce, until I started my coaching business and started realizing that that was the exception to the rule. And in a lot of cases, pre-sales was sort of like the utility that was pulled off the shelf when needed and thrown back on after the demo was done. And I think that, these particular groups and communities have done a really amazing job of espousing not only why the rule is important, but the value that the rule actually delivers in and across the sales cycle. And it is truly across the sales cycle because, and Paul, I'm sure you can elaborate this as well, pre-sales touches everything from top of funnel marketing use cases all the way through after sale customer success use cases and everything in between. And so the fact that we were underappreciated, I would say, up until recently, I think is pretty surprising, but it's great that that's sort of happening. I think the other things that these communities are doing really well is they're really affecting the ability for pre-sales individual contributors and leaders to self-enable. There was really not a ton of online material available. I mean, there were a couple of sort of well-known names in the space that had their blogs, but at the end of the day, there really wasn't a ton of stuff out there. And I think there's been an explosion in pre-sales focused content to help both ICs and leaders really help hone their craft much more effectively today, whether it's webinars or podcasts or blogs, or even things like conferences that are focused on pre-sales now, which is new and exciting. And I think the third thing that these particular communities have done that I think is really exciting is they started to accelerate new blood coming into the role of pre-sales. And I think that's a huge, huge important factor where people didn't know about the role before, so they didn't know they wanted to go into it or should go into it or consider going into it. And with all this new exposure that's being shined on the role, I think people are realizing, oh, this is something I should consider. There's a lot of value in terms of, being able to be, get into a lucrative role in sales without necessarily having to be the one ultimately responsible for closing that deal, which appeals to a lot of people in our space, I think. But it's also a really rewarding role in that it really bridges business and technology. And is fairly exciting from that perspective. So I think the community change is one. I think the second one is there's been an explosion in tooling and investment in our space. You guys are a great example, right? Reprise has been phenomenally successful. You're one of a couple dozen vendors that have really done well and sort of starting to help both individual contributors and leaders be more effective in what they do and more efficient in what they do. And there's a few vendors that were around prior to 2 years ago, but the majority of the vendors in this space have really come up over the last couple of years.
I agree.
And it's a really exciting time where now we as a pre-sales organization and pre-sales contributors are able to do our job so much more effectively because we've got these incredible tools at our disposal. And then I'd say the third big thing that I've seen is just because I think of sort of the first two, there is this massive demand for the role. I think the latest study I saw said there was 121,000 open job recs worldwide for pre-sales related roles. That's mind-boggling because there is not 121,000 people out there to fill those spots, right? And so that is a really exciting thing, that the role is getting light shined upon it, and organizations are starting to double down on this critically important role and hiring effectively. And I think the nice caveat around that is that compensation is going up accordingly, right? There's a huge demand, right, with not a lot of supply, and so it's becoming a more lucrative role, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. You put it well. I think what we've observed is the blossoming of this role as standing on its own. Before that, I remember it was like you find a couple of engineers that knew how to talk to humans, and you put them in front of the the prospect and showcase, the tour of the demo or whatever it is, or building something that works. And you had a few oddballs like this that were very successful. And I think it's a combination of, I think the thing that you're describing are a symptom of the way that people buy now. I think that we are experiencing, myself when I buy something, usually I'm informed. Like, we have enough information on the internet that I know what I need and I know what it looks like. And, there's a bunch of ways to do this. What I'm getting on a call when I'm interested in buying, I'm like, cool, yeah, here is my discovery. This is why I need this. This is my timeline. Now, can I please talk to someone that can dive into the product, right? That's the way it works. Well, granted, I'm also obviously biased, being in SE my whole life, but I feel like this is something that we're seeing a lot. And it's the fact that, buyers want to get more informed, and the products that the complexity of SaaS product is exploding. Just because the industry is exploding, you require more and more technical expertise to get into what you actually want to see. And that's how we realized that there's really a gap in, like, somebody that can storytell but be a customer advocate, with removing this close relationship with closing a deal, right? And I've spent 6 months leading a sales team. It was a great experience. But the way that people look at you when you're in pure sales, and I was the same person, I had less hair, but I was the same person. people looked at me and was like, oh, okay, so this guy, I don't trust him just because of his title. So there's this need that people are like, okay, cool, let's tell me exactly what it works and how it doesn't work. And we started to stumble upon it, to your point beforehand, where we just kind of try to figure out how to do a good demo. We, great demo, all those kind of stuff start coming out. And then eventually we were like, no, this is a profession. There's a domain of expertise here. And I love what you're doing. I love how a bunch of communities are doing. It's super exciting to see this happening. And yeah, I was in an organization with very complex product where it was a no-brainer that SEs were crucial to every deal. I still see a lot of other organizations like, why do we need an SE? Like, just try it. And we did this at Reprise, and we ended up crushing it, like basically cutting our sales cycle in half, just because we just know what we're talking about, and this is the persona that people want to talk to. So it's super interesting. And yes, I have trouble hiring. You're right.
I wanted to just point something out real quick. This idea that as soon as you changed your title, people didn't trust you as much. And it's true, right? Like, I've been a salesperson my whole life. Now I'm on the marketing side, although I really hated calling myself a salesperson and a lot of the time, because I was more of an entrepreneur, and hence the sliminess of the sales title, right? And I think that has to go away, right? It has to go away. And how do we get there? I think there's a lot of things that are happening in the macro environment to drive that. Product-led growth, I think, now reinforces the necessity for that salesperson to be an expert. And I think that, and no longer just a demo, robot, right, who's demoing features and ABC, close. That's not going to work. Someone tried to do that on me 2 days ago. I didn't buy their dog training product because I could tell, like, they were just following a script. They were doing assumptive closing, etc. And that's why I think that the SE, or that technical stakeholder, is more important than ever. And I think that's why you're seeing this grow, right? More and more, and the more that the product does the selling, now the human has to become an expert. So there's just my little spiel on it. I've always loved sales engineers because they weren't salesy. They were sometimes a little too honest, right? And they'd sort of piss the salesperson off because they were super honest, and be in a meeting and say, actually, no, that's not going to work, right? That kind of thing. And then the slimy salesperson is on the other side saying, what are you doing? I'm trying to get this deal. At the end of the day, what are we talking about here? We're talking about value being derived, long-term retention and expansion. You're not going to get that from selling.
Yeah,
right?
But I do think that we're moving away from this. I think that this like dichotomy of like demo jockey and slimy salesperson is gone. And I want to make sure that I highlight this. There is a lot of things that I do not know how to do that AEs know how to do. Like, prospecting, knowing how to, get people excited and etc. is something that I don't know how to do. So kudos to them, and that's great. And there's a lot of things to be done there. But I think everything becomes more complicated. Roles are starting to become streamlined, and I think, Carrie, you can agree with this. I think SE is just here to stay as a crucial part of the sales organization. Period. I don't think it's moving away anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you guys both make great points. I think at the end of the day, it's a team sale. Like, if you're not selling as a team, you're certainly, it's a team that's buying, right? And that average number of buyer community or communities keeps getting larger. The average number I think I saw last was there's an average of 16 people now on buying committees, right? But you have to be selling as a team, right? And it's not even so much that you can't all reach 16 people. It's that you need to be in lockstep and perfectly aligned in what you're doing. And I can't even begin to tell you how many of my clients that I coach say to me that they're so frustrated because they don't have I coach them, why didn't we do discovery? It's very obvious watching your demo, you didn't have a chance to do discovery. And the FC's response almost invariably is, I would love to do discovery. I was not given the opportunity to do so by my sales rep. And there's great sales reps out there who recognize, even if the organization doesn't mandate it and it's not part of the organizational selling culture, that you be a team and be team sales. There's sales reps that are out there that will recognize the value that being aligned with your SE partner has and will do the right thing. But there's a lot that don't. And it puts everybody at a disadvantage. And that's the challenge.
I agree.
So, and that's one of the biggest challenges for me is just trying to make sure that the sales organization recognizes the value of the partnering. And I think a lot of the time, it can be done at the individual level. The problem is that individual SEs work with individual reps, and there's strengths and weaknesses, and there's also apprehensions. I've talked to lots of SEs who are afraid of pissing off their sales reps if they give them negative feedback or constructive feedback about how they should be working better together. So I think one of the things that's really important is that this has to be something that's pushed down from the top as well. Pre-sales and sales leadership have to be aligned on this front.
Yeah, you have to be aligned, and you have to both recognize the value of this team selling. And if you have this at the leadership level, then it flows down from there.
Well, Paul, why don't we unpack this a little more? Because that was actually my next question that I had written down is, what are the biggest challenges that you face as an SE today? And originally I was thinking, external challenges, right? Preparation for the meeting with the prospect, et cetera. But it sounds like, and it's not shocking, the internal alignment is really probably top of mind and more important. Why don't we unpack that? What could we do as SC leaders out there to make sure that alignment is better with our sales counterparts?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that pre-sales are going to slow down the velocity of the AEs. I think AEs has this perfection, it's making me go through all these hoops, etc. And I've seen bad implementations of SCs where you have so much process that you literally have people hating each other, right? But luckily, I think there is ways around this, right? And if you make it clear that we're all trying to actually get a sell, then you can get much better. A few examples. You were mentioning, some of your clients being asked to go on a demo and didn't get a chance to do discovery and jumped right into the demos, right? And I can understand this, and George, you know this better than anyone, but people wants to do disco demo, right? All the time, right? And so this is where obviously I'm biased, but having a super stable demo environment that I can give to my AEs for all their disco call, amazing. I don't have to bring an SE on the call. They can do first, second, third demo if they want to, and when they're actually interested, they may come in and we're going to do the interesting stuff, right? So there's ways around this, and it doesn't have to be through Reprise. There's a lot of tooling around there that you can use, right? But you need to make sure that you equip the reps with enough of the product so that they can be independent on their own, right? Otherwise, yes, you are going to be stuck in this mode where it happens. The other thing is, and I was recently on a call with this where it was the typical one, right? Where the rep reads the agenda and now I'm going to give you to the SE, and that's it. That's the whole thing. And I was on this call because he was with another head of SE, and yes, he did an amazing job. He said, before I move on, here's what I would like to address. I think this is what I understood. And he did the whole disco for another 15 minutes before getting in a demo. It was awesome, right? I see the other way around, where the SE is launching into a demo, and the AE is going to say, no, wait a minute. Before we get into this, we're going to go through this. This is the thing that we're going to demo, but first, let me ask you a few questions, right? So I think it's fair to say that there's a different level of maturity and understanding of when to do good discovery, when to understand pain, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's about collaboration. And yes, the hardest part is how do you design? For me, is how do I design an organization where I encourage this cross-role collaboration, especially when you have a lot of moving parts, where you imagine a company that is growing as fast as ours, for instance, like we are now at a point where George and I don't know people that work at Reprise, where like a year ago we were literally a couple of people, right? And so how do you maintain this tight relationship? Difficult for something in hypergrowth. What I found is, well, I don't have the luxury to do one-on-one. It's just not economically feasible. So working in pods is something that I found probably the best way to do it. And then just doing coaching on both ends, right? And like saying, like, hey, you could have done this, you could have done that. And I have I built a whole enablement 3-week session. I do it every week. So 3-hour enablement session on how to get better at storytelling and demoing. And there's one slide that is basically just 5 bullets. Says, talk to your AE, talk to your AE, talk to your AE, seriously talk to your AE. That's it. Like, just before getting into a call, just talk to them. It's crazy. There's so many things where I don't know. And I had just to finish that, my thought, I had this realization because I'm going to date myself. I used to have to go to buildings and get a badge in order to sell something, which is unheard of, I know. But you get into that call with your AE, you better believe you prepare of exactly what's going to happen. You know, I'm going to start with doing this, and then you're going to do that, you're going to do this. If there's an objection, we do X, Y, and Z. You get into the room, you prepped, and you're like, okay, so we're going to start with this. There's a contract agreement in the first place, and you go through this. I am scared every time I get on the call with a customer where I don't know what the talk track is going to be. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm not going to wing it. That's never going to work, right? And so this is what I'm trying to put on my SE and AEs. Like, if you don't know what's going to happen during the call, don't join that call. Like, this is going to be a disaster. So yeah, that's the thing that I'm struggling with quite a bit.
Yeah, there's some interesting points you brought up there. I mean, the immediate pass off by the AE to the SE is pretty common.
Yep.
It's, where SEs for a long time have been crutches for weaker sellers, right? And it's like, I can do my 2 slides or race through them or not do them at all and just pass it off my SE. He'll do it, or she'll do a great demo and it won't matter. And that's how we're going to win the deal. And that's not how you win the deal. And when I'm coaching a lot of my SEs, a lot of the time what I'm coaching them on is that deal prep is a conversation. It's not you telling the rep what you're going to do in the demo. It's you guys deciding together what's going to happen in that meeting and who's going to do what portions of that, and making sure that you're fully aligned in all of it. So for example, Paul, you can probably relate to this. In most dry runs, what tends to happen? Oh, let's go through the demo. And the first thing that should happen is, after you figured out what you're going to do, is, well, why don't we start with what we're going to start in the presentation with, which is the actual slide deck. And let's review the slide deck, right? Because if what you, Mr. or Mrs. Sales Rep, have put in your slide deck is not aligned with what I'm going to show in the demo, then this is not going to work. And it's not just a let's critique and make sure the SE is going to do the right thing. It's let's make sure the AE is also going to do the right thing. And so it's got to be a two-way street where
it's also, it reminds me of a point. It's also like, it's being respectful to your audience. You and I, we go from Zoom to Zoom like every hour or so. Just give me some context of what we're doing. Like, you are not, 100% of my life. I need a reminder of what we said, what we're gonna do, and like get me aligned, and then let's get into it, right? If you don't set that context, like how, like, first of all, I've seen people where, I've done that mistake, so I'm not gonna pretend that it didn't happen to me. But when I get on the call, it's like, okay, so what are we gonna talk about today? This is the worst. It's like you really don't care about your audience, right? But yeah, so it's so super important to tie in the deck, the story to what you're going to show. And it's just respectful in front of the audience, period.
Yeah. I mean, even basic things too, right? Like it's amazing to me when I coach a demo, I always send the person I'm coaching a note when they submit their demo to my coaching platform, and I ask like 5 questions. And the first two are, you would think, the most obvious, but they're not always known, which is, what is our agenda as the vendor for the meeting? What is our prospect's objective for the meeting?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many times neither of those questions is known. There's no answer to them. And to your point, Paul, why are you entering in a meeting if you don't know the answer to those two questions?
Exactly. I'll send you my POC, my call checklist that I have my ACs, like I coach my ACs to say, like, do you need to know all the answers to these questions? And if you don't have them, call your AE, figure it out. And the two of them are exactly this, like, what are we expecting to do? What are they expecting to do? It's just basic. I don't know.
Yeah, but amazingly universally ignored in some cases, which is mind-boggling.
Sadly, I've been in those meetings where I've been the person going, "Oh crap!" Especially these days, you send your calendar link to folks, and you get a bunch of stuff, and you're like, "Oh man." But let's transition real quick, because I know we have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to dig into some PLG stuff, right? Like, how have you seen now? Product-led growth has really been a category. I'd say, it's really like 2-ish, 3-ish years or so since OpenView really coined it. What would you say, Carrie, you're seeing your clients experience around the impact that product-led growth motions are having on pre-sales, right? And then maybe a little bit on like champion enablement. How are champions being enabled today or not enabled, through these like PLG motions?
Yeah, it's a huge sea change in our business, where there are now so many more organizations that can start to get into PLG type motions that couldn't before tools like Reprise and others existed, where their enterprise solutions, they're too complex. You could never hand over the keys to the kingdom to somebody and say, go take a test drive, because they were just going to get lost. And invariably your system would look complex and you'd lose the deal, and that'd be the end of it. And with tools, these demo automation tools like Reprise that are now in the market, you can put the sort of guardrails around your product and add in sort of these overlays in terms of guided tours and value messaging, so that even if you're not the one delivering the demo with these demo environments, if you're handing them off to a prospect to go do the buying process how they choose on their own, they're able to safely navigate your tool, but still get a good sense of what it's capable of doing, and at the same time really understand the value to them, right? And I think that what PLG really does is it saves time. And that would have been my answer to your first question around sort of the challenges for pre-sales, is we just don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Right. We've got too many demos. We've got too much prep. We've got too much discovery. We've got too much to do. Right. And so any way that we can, start to leverage our time more effectively is going to be a huge win. It's less people that Paul has to go out and try to find that he can't find today because there's not enough people to fill those seats. If you can improve everyone's efficiency by 50%, well, guess what? Now you got half as many people you need to add to the team. 100%. So time is huge. And I think the ability of PLG to, it's got its obvious benefits in that it's now working on the buyer enablement, sort of the buyer motion rather than the selling motion. But ultimately, what is it really doing? It's helping prospects self-qualify themselves. And if we think about the fact that there are so many demos that most organizations do that are unqualified, right? And it's just a complete waste of everybody's time. If we can eliminate all of those, and on top of that, then have customers actually qualify themselves out without ever having to waste any time on them, then when we do get engaged, we're dealing with just the customers we know actually have a need and are interested and are knowledgeable about our product, where now we can have much more meaningful conversations with them.
Yeah, I agree. That's the benefit. That means for us is more than ever, we need to become even more expert at the product, because you have, like I was talking to, head of SEs at Slack, you remember, I think we were together, George, and her problem was, I can't get people to take a demo because everybody thinks they know everything about Slack. right? And so you get into this situation where, oh, I know you use this. No, you don't. And here's what you're not doing well. And so, and this is also, this is going to be my soapbox, right? I think that SEs, and my dog agrees, I think that SEs should be builders and should know the product better than everybody else. And to find the best solution, this is what they need more than ever with selling expertise, right? Granted, I'm coming from a place where the software was free, it was open source, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I better be an expert at it. But realistically, look, again, like people that are buying, people like me, I don't want somebody that, that only tells me what I can figure out on my own. And with everything that is around that can help me figure out things on my own, I need somebody that is 201, right? And that requires a tremendous amount of expertise and training. And to your point earlier, that means that we don't have time to spend on unqualified demos because we have to be able to go deep into the product and become true experts.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly spot on, Paul. And I think the other issue too is that we have to come prepared to our demos, that the customer's now much more educated. They're going to ask much more specific and pressing questions, right? And what we need to do is either, to your point, Paul, know the answers to all those questions, or better yet, have insights into what questions they're going to bring to the table. And so, the amazing thing about, demo automation tools is their ability to get insight into how the prospects are interacting with the solution before you ever get on the phone with them, right? Which parts of our tool did they spend more time in when we shared it with them? Which screens were they going to? Which ones did they ignore? And if I know they spent 20 minutes on the back end figuring out data integration, that's what I know to come prepared to talk about to my demos, right? Rather than spraying and praying. So I think that, the tools like Reprise are really helping equip SEs to be more prepared and have those better conversations than they would otherwise be just going in blind.
And again, that's what the buyers want anyway. Like I spoiler alert, I don't want to speak to anyone. So, the more educated I can be on my own, the better.
Yeah, let the buyer drive the experience, right? I think that's one of the key takeaways that I'm seeing in the market recently, in this movement. Fellas, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Paul, I know where to find you, but if folks want to follow you on social media or learn more about your insights around SE enablement and other pre-sales topics, what are the best channels or URLs to reach you?
Yeah, thanks, George. Follow me on LinkedIn, Kerry Sokolski, or Presales Mastery, or go to presalesmastery.com and you can find me there as well. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to chat with anybody.
Awesome. And Paul, I'm going to probably say the same channels for you. Just look up Paul Vidal on these channels.
I'm usually pretty responsive. So if you want to chat about, anything more in details, I'm not as good as a coach as Kerry, and I probably will push people to Kerry, but I'm happy to have conversations. So yeah, reach out.
Sell yourself short, Paul.
and real quick, Kerry, I know you have some content coming up in the coming months. So anything you want to say about that, where people can kind of keep up to date with the latest and greatest that you're sharing?
Yeah, I appreciate that, George. So Chris White, author of the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, great pre-sales trainer, and I have been working for about the last 6 months on the pre-sales buyer's guide. And this is kind of like the Gartner market scope for pre-sales. We're not ranking the vendors per se, but it's really meant to help drive awareness for pre-sales leaders in terms of what all the new vendors are that are in this space that we talked about a little bit about earlier, and provide some clarity in terms of what they actually do and the problems they can solve. If you are interested in learning more, go to presalesbuyersguide.com, sign up for our newsletter. We'll let you know when it's going to be released. It should be out sometime next month in April. All
right. Well, let's rock and roll. Shout out to our friends over at Vivint. We like them a lot. And well, I'm biased because John Bruce, old co-founder, buddy of mine, but just a lot of really cool tools out there that are popping up. And everyone, thank you so much for joining today, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. I gotta hop to the next meeting, but yeah, I will let y'all know. Carrie, I'll send